The breaking point, the Confederation of Enlightened Species, had maintained perfect order for 53,000 years. That's what the holodisplays proclaimed in 17 languages across the docking bay of Kepler-7 station. Commander Marcus Rivera had memorized those words during his 6 months hauling cargo through this orbital purgatory. 53,000 years of peace, prosperity, and progress under the benevolent guidance of the Council of Ascended Minds. Marcus didn't feel very enlightened as he watched a Veltheran customs officer rifle through his shipment of medical supplies with all 4 of its manipulator arms. Container 17 Gamma shows trace elements of unauthorized computational substrate, the Veltheran chittered, its translator rendering the words in flat, emotionless standard. Probationary species are restricted to Level 2 computational technology. This is Level 3. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. Those are diagnostic scanners for the colony on Proxima Station. Your own council approved the shipment. Approved for Level 2 diagnostics. These exceed parameters. The Veltheran's eye stalk swiveled toward him with what Marcus had learned to recognize as bureaucratic satisfaction. Confiscated. Penalty fee, 12,000 credits. Your species may file an appeal with the Subcommittee for Technological Oversight. Current processing time, 8 months. 8 months. The Proxima colonists had an outbreak of Rigelian flux. People were dying now, not in 8 months. But arguing was pointless. The Confederation had rules for everything, and humanity, the newest, least trusted member, had no choice but to follow them. Marcus authorized the payment, watching his profit margin evaporate. Another successful day in paradise. The station hummed with the business of 100 species, most of whom barely acknowledged humanity's existence. The Krell Massive, crystalline beings who'd mastered fusion technology before Earth's dinosaurs glided past without a glance. A cluster of Azeran diplomats, their skin shifting through colors that denoted complex political meanings Marcus couldn't begin to interpret, discussed matters of importance while human technicians scrubbed the deck plates around them. Humanity had dreamed of reaching the stars for centuries. None of those dreams had included being treated like the help. Commander Rivera. A human voice cut through the ambient noise. Marcus turned to see Private Chun sprinting toward him, face flushed, uniform disheveled. "Sir, we need you in the residential sector, now." The urgency in her voice bypassed his fatigue. "What happened?" "It's little Emma Kowalski. She's crashing some kind of allergic reaction to the station's air recyclers. Dr. Okongwo says she needs a full xenobiological filtration treatment, but..." Shun's voice cracked. "But the medical center won't treat her without council authorization." Marcus was already running. The residential sector occupied the worst real estate on Kepler-7 lowest gravity. Oldest life support, furthest from emergency services. Humanity's assigned zone. Marcus pushed through corridors designed for species with different proportions, his shoulders scraping walls meant for the spindly Azeran. He found a crowd outside the medical center. 30 humans, maybe more, pressing against the transparent aluminum barrier. Beyond it, Marcus could see Emma Kowalski, 7 years old. Her mother's eyes, her father's smile convulsing on a gurney, while her parents screamed for help. Dr. Yukio Konkwo stood at the barrier, her dark face twisted with fury and helplessness. "They're just standing there," she said when Marcus reached her. "The treatment is right there. The Veltheran medic knows how to administer it. But regulations state that unproven species require council authorization before." "How long does she have?" "Minutes. Maybe 10. Marcus looked at the Veltheran medic through the barrier. The creature stood beside a fully stocked medical bay, manipulator arms folded, eye stalks directed at a data pad. Following protocol. Obeying the rules. "Can you operate their equipment?" Marcus asked quietly. Dr. Okonkwo's eyes widened. Marcus, if you breach that medical bay without authorization, can you operate it? Yes, but then get ready. Marcus approached the security panel. Confederation technology was sophisticated, built on 50,000 years of refinement. It was also designed by species that had forgotten what desperation looked like. Human technology was crude by comparison. Humanity had only broken the light barrier 40 years ago, had only made contact with the Confederation 15 years past. But human programmers had spent those 15 years studying, adapting, and when necessary, breaking every alien system they could access. Marcus pulled out his personal data pad, barely level 2 tech, laughably primitive to the Confederation. But it ran code that no Veltheran or Azeran had ever seen, because it was built on human intuition, human creativity, and human stubbornness. He'd written the intrusion program himself during long, boring cargo runs. Just in case. Just in theory. The security panel flickered. Lines of code cascaded across Marcus's display, alien architecture meeting human improvisation. The Confederation designed their systems to be elegant, efficient, perfect. Marcus didn't need perfect. He needed fast. The barrier dissolved. Dr. Okonkwo didn't hesitate. She burst through with 2 human nurses, pushing past the stunned Veltheran toward Emma. The alien medic finally moved, blocking their path. This is a violation of Confederation Medical Protocol 773. I must insist. Insist later, Dr. Okonkwo snapped, shouldering past. Her hands flew across the alien medical console, translating Confederation medical technology into action through sheer force of will. The nurses had Emma on the proper gurney, oxygen mask in place. Marcus watched through the barrier as the doctor worked. Behind him, he could hear the crowd holding its collective breath. Emma's convulsions were slowing. The color was returning to her face. She was going to live. Marcus felt the deck plating vibrate. Beneath his feet, heavy footsteps, many of them. He turned to see a full security detachment approaching. 6 Krell enforcers, their crystalline bodies refracting the station's lights into fractal patterns. Beautiful and utterly merciless. The lead Krell's voice resonated through the corridor like a gong. Commander Marcus Rivera of the human species. You are under arrest for violation of Confederation security protocols, unauthorized access to restricted facilities, and interference with properly sanctioned medical procedures. Under Confederation Law Section 12, Article 9, the penalty for such violations by a probationary species member is termination of biological function. Execution. They were going to kill him for saving a child's life. Marcus raised his hands slowly, keeping them visible. Around him, the human crowd murmured, anger building, voices rising. The Krell raised their weapons, plasma projectors that could reduce a human body to constituent atoms in microseconds. Stand down, Marcus said to his people. Everyone stand down. Like hell, someone shouted from the back. They can't just, they can, and they will. Marcus met the eyes of his crew, his friends, his fellow exiles in the stars. No one else dies today. That's an order. The Krell surrounded him, weapon emitters humming. As they led him away, Marcus looked back once. Through the medical bay barrier, he could see Emma Kowalski sitting up, confused but alive. Her mother was sobbing, holding her daughter like she'd never let go. Worth it, Marcus thought. Whatever happens next, it was worth it. The holding cell was small, cold, and designed for a Veltheran's proportions, which meant Marcus had to crouch awkwardly against one wall. They'd confiscated his datapad, his comm unit, everything. He was alone with his thoughts, and the growing certainty that he'd miscalculated badly. Humanity couldn't afford martyrs. Earth was barely tolerated in the Confederation, granted membership only because the Council couldn't figure out how to quarantine an entire species that had already developed FTL travel. Every human action was scrutinized. every mistake magnified. What Marcus had done breaking Confederation security, violating medical protocols, using unauthorized technology, would give the elder species exactly the excuse they'd been looking for. Earth's provisional government would have no choice but to comply with the execution order. They'd apologize profusely, promise better oversight, maybe even exile a few thousand humans to appease the council. And Marcus would be dead, remembered as the idiot who threw away humanity's future to save one child. He almost laughed. When had the math on that trade ever made sense to the beam counters? The cell's force field flickered, then dropped. Marcus tensed, expecting Krell executioners instead. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped through, her formal diplomatic robes looking absurdly out of place in the detention block. She was followed by a floating recorder drone, meaning this conversation was official, on the record, and likely being broadcast somewhere. "Commander Rivera," she said, her voice carrying that careful neutrality diplomats perfected. "I'm here to inform you that the Confederation Council has issued a formal demand for your immediate execution. Earth's provisional government has been ordered to confirm compliance within 6 hours." Marcus nodded slowly. "And you're here to tell me they're going to comply?" "No." Vasquez's carefully neutral expression cracked, revealing something fierce underneath. "I'm here to tell you they refused." The words didn't make sense at first. They what? The provisional government received the council's demand 3 hours ago. They spent 2 hours and 58 minutes considering their response. Vasquez smiled, not a diplomatic smile, but something genuine and slightly terrifying. Then Prime Minister Okafor told the Confederation Council, and I quote, "Humanity does not execute its heroes for saving children. If the Council finds this incompatible with membership in the Confederation, Earth will consider alternative arrangements." Marcus stared at her. "Alternative arrangements?" "Elena, that's a declaration that we'll leave the Confederation if they execute you?" "Yes." She turned to the recording drone. "And since this conversation is being monitored by approximately 800 different Confederation intelligence agencies, I'll state it clearly. Earth stands with Commander Rivera. We will not bend. We will not apologize. And we will not accept a galactic order built on rules that value protocol over life." The silence that followed was immense. Somewhere in the station's computational network, Marcus imagined algorithms churning, trying to process what they'd just heard. The Confederation had maintained perfect order for 53,000 years, because no species ever challenged it. Challenges led to conflict. Conflict led to chaos. And chaos was the enemy of enlightenment. But humanity had never been particularly enlightened. "What happens now?" Marcus asked quietly. Vasquez's smile faded. "Now? Now we find out if the Confederation is willing to go to war over one human life. The Council is convening an emergency session. Enforcement fleets are being mobilized. And back home, Earth Fleet is preparing for the possibility that we might need to defend ourselves against the entire galactic community." She paused, then added softly, "You saved a child, Marcus. Emma Kowalski lived because you refused to let procedure matter more than a life. Whatever happens next, don't you dare regret that." The force field reactivated, and Vasquez was gone. Marcus sat in his cell, trying to process the enormity of what his actions had triggered. Humanity was barely a footnote in the galactic community. 3 billion people spread across a dozen colonies, with technology that made elder species laugh. Earth Fleet consisted of maybe 200 ships, most of them converted cargo haulers like his own. The Confederation had thousands of species, millions of worlds, and weapons that could crack planets. But humanity had something the Confederation had lost somewhere in its 53,000 years of perfect order. They had people who remembered that some things mattered more than rules. Outside his cell, Marcus could hear alarms beginning to sound. Kepler-7 station was going into lockdown. In the distance, he heard the distinctive hum of capital ships dropping out of FTLA, not human ships, but Confederation enforcement vessels, arriving to ensure order was maintained. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. They should have let the little girl live. Asterisk. The new Order the Confederation enforcement. Fleet arrived in Earth's system like a storm of crystalline fury. 300 warships representing 40 different species. Each vessel a masterpiece of technology refined over millennia. They formed a blockade pattern that had pacified 1,000 rebellious worlds. A geometric perfection that reflected the Confederation's fundamental belief. Order through overwhelming force. Admiral Threnzak of the Krell commanded from the flagship Eternal Harmony. His crystalline form refracted the light of Sol through the command deck, casting rainbow patterns across holographic displays showing Earth small. Blue, defiant. Transmit the standard compliance demand, he ordered, his voice resonating through the bridge like struck glass. They have 6 hours to surrender Commander Rivera and accept Confederation oversight of their government. Failure to comply will result in quarantine protocols. Quarantine protocols. A sanitized term for what amounted to species-wide imprisonment. No ships in or out, no trade, no communication. Humanity would be cut off from the galaxy until they learned obedience. The response came in 4 minutes instead of 6 hours. Confederation Fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of Earth Defense Command. The human voice crackled across every ship's communication system. Your demands are rejected. Commander Rivera acted to preserve life in accordance with human law and basic morality. We will not surrender him, we will not accept oversight, and we will not be intimidated. Threnzak's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been surprise. They're transmitting on open channels. Every species in the Confederation is hearing this. There's more, his communications officer reported. They're broadcasting from Luna Base, Mars Command, and Admiral, they're broadcasting from inside Kepler-7 station itself. Every human device in Confederation space is relaying this message. On the main display, Admiral Chun's face appeared dark-skinned, sharp-eyed, wearing a uniform that looked almost comically primitive compared to Confederation military dress. Behind her, Threnzak could see what appeared to be a converted cargo facility, hastily repurposed into a command center. For 53,000 years, Chun continued, the Confederation has maintained peace through submission. You've created a galaxy where questioning authority is illegal, where challenging protocols is punishable by death, where saving a dying child requires permission from bureaucrats light years away. She leaned forward. Humanity rejects this. Not with violence, not with hatred, but with a simple truth. Your rules are broken, and we will not pretend otherwise. Threnzak felt something he hadn't experienced in his 4 centuries of service uncertainty. This is theater. They have 200 ships at most, barely capable of FTL travel. What do they think they can accomplish? Sir, the tactical officer's voice carried an unusual tension. The human fleet is dispersing. They're not forming any recognizable defensive pattern. Their ships they're moving randomly. On the tactical display, the human vessels scattered like startled fish, each one following an unpredictable trajectory. It was chaos. It was inefficient. It violated every principle of coordinated fleet action that the Confederation had perfected over millennia. It was also impossible to target effectively. They're jamming our targeting. Solutions, the tactical officer reported. Confusion evident even through their translator. But not with technology. They're jamming us with movement. Our firing algorithms can't predict their vectors because there's no logic to their positioning. Threnzak understood warfare as mathematics positions, trajectories, optimal firing solutions. The human fleet was rejecting mathematics in favor of improvisation. His mind struggled to process the concept. All ships, execute suppression pattern Delta 7, he commanded. If they won't maintain proper formation, we'll simply overwhelm the volume of space they occupy. The Confederation fleet moved with practiced precision, weapons charging. 300 ships prepared to demonstrate. Why order always triumphed over chaos. Then the humans did something unprecedented. They attacked. First. It wasn't an attack in any traditional sense. The human ships didn't fire weapons. Most of them barely had weapons worth mentioning. Instead, they launched thousands of small objects. Cargo containers, mining drones, even what appeared to be compressed waste material. Debris? Threnzak's tactical officer sounded insulted. They're throwing garbage at us? But the debris was moving fast, scattered across every approach vector, creating a cloud of obstacles that forced the Confederation fleet to slow, to adjust, to break their perfect formation. And while the fleet was distracted, double quotes, sir, multiple human vessels have broken through the blockade line. They're using the debris as cover, accelerating on unpredictable vectors. We can't establish targeting locks. Minor nuisance, Threnzak declared, though his crystalline structure flickered with doubt. Let them through. They're fleeing. We'll hunt them down after we secure Earth. Admiral, his intelligence officer interrupted. They're not fleeing. They're heading for the outer system jump points. And they're broadcasting. The main display split into a dozen screens. Each showed a different human ship captain, all transmitting on open channels. This is Captain Okafor of the Determination. To any species tired of Confederation restrictions, coordinates attached. Let's talk about alternatives. Commander Liu here aboard the Defiance. We're establishing a free port at the Kepler-7 system. No Confederation oversight, no arbitrary rules. All species welcome. Captain Rodriguez, unbreakable. We've got Confederation technology specs we're happy to share. Turns out when you actually study this stuff, instead of just accepting what you're told, you can improve it. Sir, we can't. They're using Confederation communication networks. They're inside our own systems. The communications officer's voice carried something Threnzak had never heard before. Fear. Admiral, we're receiving reports from across Confederation space. The Denari Collective is questioning their tributary status. The Meridian Free Worlds are demanding representation on the Council. 3 minor species have declared. They're calling it independence. The word hung in the air like a curse. Independence. In 53,000 years, no species had claimed independence because the Confederation was everything. To leave was to embrace chaos, to reject enlightenment, to choose the darkness of isolation. Except humanity was showing them it didn't have to be isolation. It could be freedom. The human fleet is regrouping, Tactical reported. They're forming a defensive perimeter around Earth, but it's still that same chaotic non-pattern. Admiral, our probability matrices give us a 97% chance of military victory. But double. But what? But even if we win, sir, the damage is done. 17 species have already filed formal protests with the Council. The ideological contamination has spread too far. Threnzak looked at Earth on his display, that small blue world that had been nothing but an irritant, a problem to be managed. Humanity had been in the Confederation for barely 15 years. They possessed no superweapons, no ancient technology, no secret advantage. All they had was the audacity to say no, and apparently that was enough. They brought Marcus Rivera before the full Galactic Council in chains. Symbolic chains. Humanity lacked the strength to physically resist at this point, but chains nonetheless. The council chamber was a cathedral of ancient power, a vast sphere where representatives of 500 species floated in their designated positions, arranged in concentric rings that reflected status, age, and influence. Humanity's position was at the outermost ring. Barely inside the chamber at all, Marcus stood at the center, facing the council of ascended minds, the 12 eldest and supposedly wisest beings in the known galaxy. They existed as pure consciousness within crystal matrices, their thoughts translated into words that echoed through the chamber. Marcus Rivera, the first ascended, spoke, its voice like wind through digital reeds. Your actions have precipitated the greatest crisis the Confederation has faced in 11,000 years. 43 species have questioned our authority. 7 have threatened secession. The order we have maintained through careful balance threatens to collapse into chaos. What do you say to these charges? Marcus looked up at the assembled power of the galaxy. A human would have been terrified. Maybe he was terrified, but he'd had 6 days in detention to think about what he'd say if given the chance. I say your order is a lie, he began quietly. The chamber's acoustics carried his voice to every floating delegate. You call it peace, but it's stagnation. You call it enlightenment, but it's control. You've created a galaxy where asking questions is dangerous, where innovation is restricted, where saving a child's life requires permission from beings who've forgotten what it means to be mortal. We have maintained stability, the second ascended intoned. We have prevented the wars that plagued the early epochs. We have created prosperity. You've created a museum, Marcus countered. A beautiful, perfect, dead museum. Do you know what happened when humanity first joined the Confederation? We were excited. We thought we'd find partners, friends, teachers. Instead, we found ourselves categorized, restricted, told we were too primitive to be trusted with the galaxy's secrets. He gestured at the assembled species. Most of you don't even remember why you follow the rules anymore. You just do it because that's what you've always done. The Confederation doesn't serve you. You serve it. And anyone who questions that gets labeled dangerous, rebellious, chaotic. And you would replace our order with what? The third ascended asked. Human chaos? Your species has existed in space for barely a generation. You understand nothing of the complexities involved in governing a galactic civilization. You're right, Marcus said, and the admission surprised the council. We don't understand galactic governance. We're new, we're crude, we're barely functional on our best days. But we understand something you've forgotten. Systems exist to serve people, not the other way around. Rules should protect life, not bureaucracy. And when a law says to let a child die because proper forms weren't filed, that law is wrong. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species signaled agreement with flashing bioluminescence. Others transmitted outrage through subsonic harmonics. The perfect order of the council was fracturing in real time. The first ascended pulsed with authority, demanding silence. You speak of changing laws. The Confederation's legal framework has been refined over millennia. It cannot simply be ... rewritten. Why not? Marcus asked simply. Who decided it was perfect? When was the last time you questioned whether your rules still made sense? 100 years ago? 1,000? 10,000? He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or eye equivalents of as many delegates as he could. The galaxy is full of species that came before us, species with knowledge and power humanity can barely imagine. But somewhere along the way, you all stopped growing. You stopped questioning. You built a perfect system and then became its prisoners. And humans will free us? The second ascended's tone dripped with sarcasm. You, who can barely travel between stars without our navigational assistance. You, whose technology is primitive by any measure. You will teach the enlightened species wisdom? No, Marcus said. We'll just remind you what it feels like to care about something more than procedure. We'll show you that imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. And maybe, just maybe, we'll help you remember that rules are tools, not masters. The silence that followed was profound. The Council of Ascended Minds conferred in thought spaces beyond Marcus's perception, their consciousness flowing through dimensions he couldn't comprehend. Finally, the first Ascended spoke. Your eloquence changes nothing. The Confederation cannot function if species simply disregard laws they find inconvenient. If we pardon you, we establish precedent for chaos. Then establish precedent for change instead. A new voice rang out. Marcus turned to see Ambassador Vasquez entering the chamber, flanked by delegates from a dozen other species. Behind them, holographic representatives of hundreds more appeared. Minor species, young species, forgotten species, all the voices that usually went unheard in the Council's grand debates. The Meridian Alliance stands with humanity, one of the Denari representatives declared, their crystalline voice harmonizing in ways that suggested deep conviction. We, too, have chafed under restrictions that served only to maintain the status quo. We demand a voice in our governance. The Outer Rim Collective seconds this motion. Another voice added, the Confederation speaks of enlightenment, but enforces compliance. This must change. The chamber descended into orchestrated chaos, which Marcus was beginning to realize might be humanity's greatest export. Not disorder, but the willingness to challenge order when it became oppressive. The first Ascended pulsed with colors Marcus couldn't name. This is ... unprecedented. The Council must deliberate. But know this, Marcus Rivera. If we grant clemency, if we permit changes to our fundamental structures, the Confederation you create may not survive. Order is what holds chaos at bay. Remove that order, and civilizations fall. Or, Marcus said quietly, maybe they finally start to live. The Galactic Compact was signed 6 months later in that same chamber. But the atmosphere had transformed completely. The rigid hierarchy of floating positions had been disrupted. Species mingled freely now, discussing, debating, sometimes arguing. It was messy. It was inefficient. It was alive. The Compact maintained some Confederation structure systems that had genuinely worked for millennia, but introduced revolutionary changes. Species could question laws. Technology restrictions were lifted for peaceful applications. Medical treatment became a right, not a privilege granted by bureaucratic approval. And most importantly, the Council of Ascended Minds was no longer absolute. They became advisors, not rulers. Marcus stood in the observation gallery, watching delegates argue passionately about trade regulations. Ambassador Vasquez joined him, carrying 2 containers of coffee, a human vice that was rapidly spreading through the galaxy. Despite being inefficient compared to Confederation nutritional supplements. You know the Krell are calling this the human contamination, Vasquez said with a wry smile. They claim we've infected the galaxy with our chaos. And what do the Krell who signed the compact call it? The awakening. She sipped her coffee. Turns out even crystalline beings can get tired of 50,000 years of the same routines. Below them, Emma Kowalski, now 8 years old, and the unofficial mascot of the new Galactic Compact, was giving a group of Veltheron, younglings, an enthusiastic and scientifically questionable lecture about Earth animals. The Veltherans' eye stalks were all pointed at her with what Marcus had learned to recognize as fascination. Think it'll work? Marcus asked. All this chaos we've unleashed? Honestly? I have no idea. Vasquez grinned. But that's the point, isn't it? The Confederation knew exactly what would happen every day for 50,000 years. They had perfect predictability and called it enlightenment. We're offering them something scarier and more valuable. Possibility. Marcus watched as a Denari delegate made an impassioned argument for new terraforming regulations. while an ancient Krell one of the old guard, who'd initially opposed any changes, listened thoughtfully before offering a modification that made both sides consider new angles. Chaos, maybe, but productive chaos. The kind where different perspectives collided and sometimes, just occasionally, created something none of them could have built alone. They're going to name a law after you, Vasquez mentioned casually. The Rivera Principle. When protocol and morality conflict, choose morality and fix the protocol afterward. That's terrible legal framework, Marcus protested. I know. The Ascended Minds hate it. But 43 species have already incorporated it into their legal codes. She laughed. You've made following your conscience official galactic policy. The universe may never recover. Good, Marcus said softly. An alert chimed on Vasquez's datapad. Your ship is ready. They've upgraded the Wanderer with some Confederation Tech Level 5 computation substrates, enhanced engines, the works. Errantly, probationary status isn't a thing anymore. You're free to explore wherever you want. Marcus felt the weight of the last months lift slightly. He was being released not as a criminal granted clemency, but as a citizen of a new order, imperfect, chaotic, and more alive than anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. Where will you go? Vasquez asked. Marcus thought about it. The galaxy was vast, full of species who were just now learning to question their place in it. Full of young civilizations who'd been told to wait their turn, to follow the rules, to not cause trouble. I think I'll check on the Outer Rim Collective, he said. Last I heard, they're having some trouble with old Confederation loyalists who think the new freedoms are dangerous. Figure they could use someone with experience in being dangerous. Vasquez smiled. Commander Rivera, I'm appointing you as Special Ambassador for Transitional Relations. Your mission is to travel the galaxy helping species adapt to the new compact. You'll have full diplomatic authority and absolutely no oversight. That sounds like a terrible idea. I know. The Council of Ascended Minds said the same thing. She extended her hand, which is exactly why it's perfect. Go remind the galaxy that terrible ideas sometimes change everything. Marcus shook her hand, then headed for the docking bay. Behind him, the council chamber continued its beautiful, chaotic work. Hundreds of species learning to govern themselves, not through obedience to ancient laws, but through the messy, frustrating, essential process of working together as equals. The Confederation had maintained perfect order for 53,000 years. Humanity had shattered it in 6 months, and somehow the galaxy was better for it. As Marcus boarded the Wanderer, its upgraded engines humming with Confederation technology now freely shared, he thought about Emma Kowalski alive, healthy, and teaching aliens about Earth dogs with the kind of enthusiasm that could only come from never being told what was impossible. The galaxy had tried to teach humanity its rules. Humanity had responded by rewriting them. And in the end, that made all the difference. Asterisk.